Hello and welcome to Game Changers with Vicki Abelson, and that would be me. And my guest tonight, or today, do we say today or tonight? It's still light out. Is Mike Rowe.
Thank you. Don't rush.
Step on your lines.
Mm-hmm.
I promise I won't do that. I'm going to muzzle it. I'm going to muzzle it, Mike.
All right. I trust you.
How are you?
I'm better. I've been better, but I've been okay. Tired. I'm getting.
Okay, so
yes. Can you hear? I'm saying I'm
getting what?
I'm getting housebound. I'm getting a little house crazy. We've only had one car for a while because we're about to buy we got rid of our second car, waiting to get the new second car. But I said, why get it? Because it's COVID. It's going to sit in the driveway.
Right.
Where am I going to go?
Okay, so let's talk about this because I was telling you before the show that the COVID crazies are the audience here today. And as they start filing in, what were you doing when lockdown happened? Were you working? Were you in an office? What were you doing?
I was rushed home from Canada.
Oh.
We were finishing writing the Trailer Park Boys. And I had to get home. Otherwise, I felt like, am I going to be stuck in Canada for the rest of forever?
So wait, so like what date? Do you remember what date it was? Was it like right at the lockdown?
It was basically at the lockdown. Was it March 17th or something? It was like
that's late.
It was like, come home now, or you might be stuck there because nobody knew what was happening or what was going on.
Was it going on in Canada?
You know what? No, it wasn't. It wasn't really a threat there at the time. Nobody really knew yet what it was. And that's why, I had to get back because people were like, is this going to be a crazy thing? Is it going to be, second part, but we had to finish the episodes.
Right.
So I had to, on my feet, learn how to direct the animation, direct the voices, back here at my desktop all the way out into Nova Scotia. And they were in separate rooms. And the Trailer Park Boys, I don't know how many people know about them, but part of their comedy is the chaos of them yelling at each other.
I've been watching.
Yeah. So, in fact, when we started doing the animated show, because it was live action forever, they, for the first time, had to read off of pages.
Right.
One at a time, because that's how you do animation. You kind of do your own. Each one has his own separate track.
Right.
They didn't know how to do it. They just felt uncomfortable to them. So I just said, you know what, guys, let's just do it like you're shooting a show. Just give everybody body mics, put a boom over you, and just talk to each other, and we'll record it that way. So it was tricky because we just did it all as one track of them all together. Usually in animation, you get to separate and pick the best ones. And
right.
So then I was faced with that problem again. I was here, they were in Canada, and they were sequestered from each other. So we had to figure out how to get them to bounce back and forth like they do.
Wow. And did it end up sounding natural?
It sounded pretty good. We just had to do extra takes, and make sure we had it, and but it was fun. It was a good learning experience, and plus, they're like 5 hours different. So I had to do it at 6 a.m. I'm like half out of it, but it ended up being a lot of fun, actually.
Wow. That is, I would be interested to watch, I would be interested to watch an episode before you went into lockdown and then one after and see if I can detect a difference. Do you think I would be able to?
No, nobody would know.
There's a pros.
It just took a little more time,
So how did you feel about getting on the airplane, Mike, did you even realize what COVID was at that point?
No. We knew there was a pandemic. We knew it was starting, but we didn't know the how bad it was going to be.
Right.
And so I was in Nova Scotia, and that's that's like above Canada. I mean, above Maine. It's like way. But I got an early flight, and I felt good because I'm waiting to get on, and there's nobody. There's nobody on the plane. It feels like I'm in the waiting area because they was already talking about it coming from Asia.
Right.
And then just as I sort of relaxed, thinking I was going to have the whole plane to myself, like 2 busloads of people from Asia
No.
onto the flight.
Oh no.
And it's just not knowing what it is. You just, just who knows? So but it was, fine.
Are you, how would you classify yourself in general? Are you an alarmist? Are you relaxed? Are you calm? What's your thing?
It's kind of case by case.
Yeah.
I have anxiety issues. I'm not it's not awful, but it's kind of funny, too, like, and I write about this in my book, that it's an interesting phenomenon, like, and I don't know if people are sort of like this in different workplaces, but like I could be a writer on a show and almost be like the star of the room. I like feel so relaxed. And then literally the very next show, and it's not completely explainable, I feel like everybody's talking Chinese and I have no idea what's going on. I can't get a handle on the show and I don't connect with anybody in the room. And then I'm the quiet guy, which is not good, but it's such a crazy phenomenon. And then I start to get anxious because, like, why can't I, what's wrong? What's happening? It's a weird thing. Maybe people feel that too at the workplace and different jobs. I don't know. But
I think in life, I mean, people are always shocked, but I can be shy and not know how to socialize. I forget that I know how to socialize. And then other times I'm the gregarious life of the party. So yes, I totally relate to that, actually.
So maybe it's just a comfort zone that maybe we don't have that much control over. I don't know. It's even.
Okay, so speaking of having control over, I was mentioning to you earlier, today is my 19th sober birthday. And I was looking at I was reading your book and we're going to talk about your book. And I wish, there's a way that I could like put a screenshot up here. I'm so technically kind of lamely.
Sure, I can do this.
Oh, can you hold up the book?
That?
It's a funny thing how the professional comedy business made me fat and bald. It's wonderful. And for those of you out there who are looking for something good to do, aside from watching Netflix, and Mike has 2 shows on Netflix right now. I think you got 2 running right now, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got the Trailer Park Boys, and you've got, and I keep saying this name wrong. You've
Paradise PD. And there's old shows that I've worked on 1,000 years ago, but I was on Futurama for most of the run of that. I think that's on Netflix.
Is that on Netflix now?
Is it Netflix or Hulu? I think it's Hulu.
I was going to ask you about Family Guy. Did you know John Holmquist?
No.
John Holmquist is an animator. I guess you guys wouldn't mix, but yeah.
No, it's funny. All the animated shows I work on, for some reason, writers never even meet the animators, it seems.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So your father owned a bar, and you would go in that, you would frequent that bar, and you had a cool jukebox and all that stuff. What did you ever, and then in bars your whole career as a stand-up, what's your deal with drugs and alcohol?
It's crazy, and especially in the stand-up world. And this, I did stand-up in the early '80s, like when the boom happened. But there was a lot of cocaine around in that time.
Yeah.
And I was in New York City. There was a lot of crack. And it's funny, I did nothing. I did none of it. I had an occasional drink, but I guess I was really serious about what I wanted to do, so I didn't want to mess around, and I didn't want to get any habits or anything happening. And now, trapped in the house, I think I'm still not sure if like a shot or 2 of bourbon a night is a lot. I'm afraid to ask, but that's what's been happening. I'm dealing with the COVID stuff.
Okay, so how seriously have you and your wife been taking the COVID? Do you go to the supermarket?
Yes. Well, we've both been vaccinated, and we're weeks past the 2nd shot. So we think we're invincible, but we got to be careful. But I mean, we just try to get out of the house. I mean, at one point we were trapped here so much we were using cigarettes for money. Anyway. See, little. Uh,
COVID jokes, they just keep coming.
Oh,
So
yeah.
wait, did you go to the supermarket though when it was like lockdown? Did you go then too?
yes, but it was funny because it was. I felt like we would go separately usually, and for me,
Yeah.
it felt like that show Supermarket Sweepstakes, where I would just like run in and just grab stuff, and I did like in a sweat and exhausted when I got out. Like I could shop in like 15 minutes, just get the thing full and ready to go.
Are you a good masker? Do you wear your mask and behave well out in the world?
I had, I don't leave the house. I haven't, uh,
Let's talk about this for a minute. So you don't feel all right now that I'm double vaccinated also and in full efficacy. I have not been in a supermarket in a year. I just in the last 2 weeks have started going to outdoor restaurants. I've been to 5 outdoor restaurants in 2 weeks. I hadn't eaten anywhere but in my house in a year. I felt safe doing that. You don't feel safe going out in the world at all?
well, here's the truth. In the last week, 2 weeks, my wife and I went to 2 indoor.
No. Oh, stop. How did you do that? I couldn't do it. I tried to walk in. I couldn't do it. Did you feel nervous?
No, the double vax thing is helpful, but also like there's nobody around for 5 tables. You know what I mean? You can't, there were like, there were like 10 people in there in an entire restaurant.
Really? Because I walked into into Mort's Deli, and it was almost every table. I can't do this.
No, I won't do that. I won't go into bars. I won't go. If there's people shoulder to shoulder, I won't go near it. Even outside, I won't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so all of your work for the last year has been from home.
Yeah, well, you don't know, but I've been doing development over Zoom, which gets really exhausting really fast. It's weird.
Tell us.
Well, first of all, sometimes you'll have like 5 or 6 executives and the 2 other writers and an agent or whatever.
Well,
And
that's exhausting anyway. That's just downright exhausting. No?
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's weird. You're just kind of pitching. You're alone at your desk and you're pitching, and it feels like you're just yelling down an empty well. No, there's just you're yelling at your computer.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's one thing if you're going on to like this and just kind of have fun and stuff, but when you're like trying to sell, and then there's always the complications of like I've been pitching a lot of animated stuff, so
Right.
we have to drop in, pictures and cartoons and stuff like that, and there's always tech issues, and
Ugh.
so.
And do you write? Do you have a writing partner, Mike, or do you write? Or do you write by yourself?
I usually write by myself, but what's been happening now more and more is like my agent or my manager will set me up with like a young writer who they feel like has a viable idea, and then they say meet with him or her, see if it's something you like, and you can help them shape into a pitch and then shape into a pilot and that sort of stuff. So
how is that for you? Because that's kind of like a mentor role. Do you enjoy that, or is that how is that for you?
it's kind of fun in a way, especially, not it's kind of good to not be in a writer's room for a while, and it feels less competitive and more about the creativity and what you're trying to work on. A lot of times in the rooms, there's a lot of politics going on and weird camps, and so sometimes it just gets to it depends on the show, but so anyway, it's just sort of more fun to just work within small groups.
And has anybody been successful? Any of these young writers that you've worked with?
Not particularly.
Okay.
But also,
so did anybody get a development deal from a pitch yet?
we actually, I'm developing one that's going to star David Cross, and So we signed on with a production company. In fact, today was our first meeting of like, okay, how do we redesign it for the people that they want to pitch to? Um, this was interesting too. I developed with Nancy Cartwright, who does Bart's voice,
Uh-huh.
animated Christmas musical with Jason Mraz.
Wow.
So we had to pitch that on Zoom with Jason Mraz in his studio. So he's flipping around guitar to piano, you know, singing songs. And so it was crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah. So now that you've gotten, it sounds like you're very entrenched in the, is it like once you go animated, you can't go back? I mean, it's like, is this like your thing now? Are you like the king of animation, writing comedy thing?
I kind of like it because I went back into multicam not too long ago, or maybe it's much longer than I think now that I've lost complete track of time. But I went to Two Broke Girls for a season.
Right, yes.
And I did not care for it. I forgot that multicam sitcoms, you basically rewrite the show almost every single day until it's time to shoot it.
Yeah.
And it just feels like it's just not gonna end ever. But with animation, it's everything takes so much more time that you know you can't keep rewriting it. You can't keep getting a lot of notes. You just have to keep moving forward. You know, once you get caught in notes, you just never will catch up.
Right.
So, and then you don't have to deal with the actors so much, which, you know, depending on the show, that could be a blessing because, you know, the actors will feel less vulnerable because they're really not on camera, you know.
Right.
And there's a different level of confidence too, I think, with them, or you know, it just seems more interesting to me and more fun, and you know, plus writing animation, you know, it's limitless, you know, especially on Futurama. You know, it's you can go to any galaxy and any planet, and the budget doesn't change. You know, on a multicam, you go, we want to put it in a pet shop, and they go, that's $500,000. You sure you want to do that scene? Yeah. Futurama, I said we want to go to a galaxy of monkeys that's 80,000 light years away. All right, put it in.
So your fertile imagination is free to go wild and
right.
You know, I have like these pressing questions I want to ask you that are all out of order, but one that I have to ask you right away because I'm so curious. So I know you've done a lot of roasts on Comedy Central, and I know that you did one for the Idiot in Chief before he was the Idiot in Chief. What was that like? So Mike did the roast for Donald Trump. Do you remember what year that was? Approximately? Like 10 years ago, maybe, or something?
Well, it could be already, yeah.
So what was that? What was that like? What was that like?
Well, first of all, he wouldn't know a joke if it bit him in the ass. Obviously, I mean that.
Wait, I have to pull out my plug. It's driving me crazy. Yeah, I'm listening.
So, what's happening? So
plugs out there. I could see them in the shot, and it was bothering me. Sorry.
Yeah. So his notes would be, you know, he would do a joke about like his apartment, his 43,000 square foot apartment in Midtown Manhattan. You know, his note would be, make that 65,000 feet. You know, it was that. It was like, you know, his net worth of 80 million, and he goes, no, make that 1 billion. You know, it would just, that's the only thing he saw on the scripts.
Did he laugh at anything?
No.
No.
In fact, what we had to do,
yeah.
we had to stop tape at one point in the middle of it because he wasn't laughing. And then Jeff Ross had a talk with him, and he explained, he goes, you have to look like you're having fun. Otherwise, it just feels mean. It feels like everybody's being mean. It really affects the tone of the show. So, he had to, and we didn't get him to laugh that much. If you look at that roast, you'll kind of see the same clip being used over and over of him laughing. And then there was another odd thing too. You okay? Everything?
Yeah, I just spilled something. I'm having, it's like I've been drinking. I haven't drank in 19 years. Hang on, now I'm going to get something to fix. I'm listening now.
This is my favorite part of the show. The spilling, the comedy spilling.
I'm unplugging things. This is a very professional operation, Mike.
It's a funny bit. That's one of your best bits. The spilling bit.
The spilling.
The unplugging bit.
Unplugging. That's my closer.
I would open with the spilling.
Open with the spilling, close with the unplugging. So wait, who roasted him? Do you remember who was on the roast?
Well, I'm always proud of my joke that actually became so popular, it became part of the 2016 election.
What?
Snoop Dogg
said
Trump is thinking of running for president. Why not? It's not the first time he pushed a black family out of their home.
How did that become part of the election?
It became part of all these memes, and all these political websites used it. And at one point I clicked on a meme and it had like 30 million hits.
Oh, stop.
And the joke just kind of like, it's been weird. I watching Conan one night with Snoop, and Conan brings up the joke and asks about the joke. And of course, Snoop barely remembered it, but. And then somebody sent me a picture of the front of a liquor store where it had a sign with all the slide letters. You can put with this whatever liquor's on sale.
Right.
And somebody wrote in the slide letters of their liquor store, wrote that joke. They spelled out the joke on the sign.
Wow. One of your proudest moments, I bet.
I know. How many comedy writers can say they were on a marquee at a liquor store?
All right, so wait, I'm jumping all over the place. So your father had a liquor store. You were in Connecticut, right?
Yeah, he had a bar. He had a little corner shitty bar.
He had a bar. Was he an alcoholic, Mike?
No, he hardly drank ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so your upbringing, your youth, you were hanging out. I seem to recall one story that was a little illicit of something that happened in that bar.
Right, because this was late 60s.
Right.
So I kind of remember probably through the ages at least 6 through 9, I was spending time there at night with my dad, like at prime time of this awful, well, to me, it was cool. It was a fantastic bar as a kid. I mean, what kind of
clientele were at your father's bar?
Alcoholics.
Yeah, good.
Pimps.
Oh.
Factory workers. My hometown was a lot of factories. We made crescent wrenches and clock parts. And there was a factory right across the street. And there was a lot of softball players because my dad had like 10 beer teams in the bar league. And that was, and I wonder if bars still do that, but that was a way of kind of making money. My dad would recruit these like college age kids, and he had these great baseball teams or softball teams. And there was at least, 4 or 5 games a week. And as a kid, I was kind of the bat boy, scorekeeper.
Nice.
Or when the pitcher had to warm up, I was the kid, and they would whip underhand fastballs at me at 90 miles an hour in my head. And, so yeah, I was a kid in this place. And this one thing was, my dad had a go-go dancer. And I'm still not exactly sure what the go-go dancer was or did exactly. And my dad always made it a point to get me out of there that night that she would show up.
Right.
That, as a kid, even made me more curious. Like,
Of course.
what happens? What does she do? What is, So one night, it's, I look at the Schaefer bear clock, and it's creeping. Yeah, and it's creeping.
I'm just getting a memory recall to Schaefer beer. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. 35 cents a glass or something, And but it's getting near 9 o'clock, like go girl showtime, and my dad's nowhere around, and I'm like, am I gonna see what's, and I'm sort of like, hiding alongside the ice machine, like,
How old are you?
I'm like, I was probably 9.
Oh, wow.
And so sure enough, like the lights go dim. There's like, I don't know, 8 people, a couple pimps and drunk guys, an old guy, and, and I just have this weird vision, by the way, too, of like some guy going up to the jukebox. I don't know who he was, but he went behind it and turned up the volume and then dropped a bunch of quarters in, and it's playing whatever the 70s hit was of, Three Dog Night or something. And there was this little tiny stage, this not that much bigger than a tabletop. And someone turns on the spotlight, which was, I think my dad took it from our Christmas tree, that wheel that spins, the red, blue, and green wheel that shines on the metal Christmas tree. Do you know those from the 60s?
I'm a Jewish girl.
All right.
Yeah.
So I see her come out from the bathroom, and she's wearing groovy white go-go boots and a sparkly bikini. I'm like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? And then she gets up and starts dancing and starts shimmying, and I'm like, oh my God, is this my first sexual experience? What is, I like went through puberty at that moment a little prematurely. All of a sudden my voice is changing. Everything is happening. And I didn't know, like, does she become naked? Does she keep dancing? Does she read poetry? I don't know what. And then as it was starting to build up, my dad apparently was like in the basement, doing inventory or something, and kind of came up the stairs and realized, and he like freaked out and just grabbed me like a fireman, like when a house is on fire, and just ran me out of the building. And so I've yet, it's funny too, I never asked my dad. My dad has passed away, over 8 years ago. So that would have been interesting to ask him, of like, what actually happens? Was there nudity? Does she just dance?
I don't know if she does anything. Wow.
I'm going to do some research on that.
You never got to come back and see it again, clearly.
No. I can't imagine my hometown would allow a woman to be partially nude in a public place. I don't know.
I can't imagine. Well, I don't know. I mean, they did it somewhere, I guess. I don't know.
But the kind of stuff I experienced in that bar as a kid, playing pool with the pimps. Yo, little man, come on to play. There was a factory worker who was laid off, and he was coming in a lot, and then he was just getting more and more depressed. And they shut him off, and then he pulled out a gun and started shooting.
What?
And the barmaid got shot in the hand, I remember.
Ooh.
And I wondered, like, even at that age, like, why does my dad let me experience this? Is it some big purpose he has in mind, some big life lessons? And I was waiting on those car rides home to kind of him to explain things. And it was more like, yeah, don't tell your mother. I mean, that was about it.
Wow. And so parents didn't know then to help us process that kind of stuff, I guess. No. He probably didn't process it for himself.
Yeah.
So Mike, when did you When did you realize you were funny? How did you realize you were funny? Did you always want to do this? When did it start?
You know what? It probably started at those bar days, because as a kid, especially the softball players, they were all really snarky and funny, and there was this brotherhood of people who would make each other laugh. And I experienced that as a kid, you know.
Uh-huh.
There was kind of a power in that, you know.
Wait, sports guys were funny? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, well, they were, you know, it's funny, I do remember like a thing that they really all laughed about.
Yeah.
There was this older guy, really old, I guess. Well, back then old was, you know, 69 or whatever. But he had such a problem drinking, and he drank so much that he had the shakes. You know, his hands were shaking all the time. But they liked him, and they made, you know, they were friends with him, and they joked around with him. And so he proudly pulled out a picture of himself when he was in the service, and he shows a picture, and it's, you know, it's shaking like this. And then the guys are like, and the guy, so one of the ball players took it and then shook it and goes, "Yeah, it looks just like you." So, but the way that those guys broke out laughing, the energy that created for me as a kid was like, there was something about it. And my dad too was really into puns, and I saw how people reacted at family gatherings. And
Was he funny?
yeah, he had I think he kind of lived through me vicariously at some point. You know, I think he wanted to see what that felt like, to have the power to, you know, make audiences laugh.
Did he encourage you? Did your parents encourage you?
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, there was a sort of a lot of tension in our family, you know, and part of what made it better was those moments where the family would gather in front of the TV and watch sitcoms, right? So there you go. It was those moments of calm and the family laughing together, and then me as a kid going, well, there's something about this, and cut to me writing sitcoms. But my dad and I would bond over the old comics on TV.
Okay, so like, did you watch Ed Sullivan? Where were you seeing your comedy?
Yeah, mostly Ed Sullivan.
Right.
I think there were a lot of variety shows on at that time, you know. So, and I think the Dean Martin roast might have started then. I forget how early those started. So my dad would laugh, and that kind of became the fabric of our relationship.
Mm.
So, in fact, when for my dad's 60th birthday, and this is he was still living in Connecticut in a small town called Woolkit.
Mm-hmm.
For his 60th birthday, I hired Henny Youngman to show up at his birthday party.
Stop. How? No, you didn't.
Yeah.
Oh my, how old was Henny at that point?
Henny, I bet, was in his 90s.
Oh my God. I cannot believe you got Henny Youngman to come to a private party.
Yeah.
Oh, was he one of your dad's favorites?
Yes, absolutely. He would try to work Henny Youngman jokes into his life. You know what I mean? It's like, I clearly remember as a little kid, like trying to get out of school, and I was pretending I was sick. And my dad very dryly said, "Well, does it hurt when you go like this?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, don't go like that."
So Henny Youngman comes to your father. Did your father lose his mind? Did he go crazy? I mean, I can't even imagine.
Well, yeah, if you think about it, it's, you know, it's his finished off basement.
Yeah.
He's got 90 of his closest friends and family, and it was a surprise for him. And first of all, if you think like a small hometown, you know, if you see like the local weatherman across the street, it's like a celebrity sighting. So you can imagine like Henny Youngman showing up in your house.
I can't.
And so there was a sound system, you know, set up for the DJ or whatever. And then I got up to wish my dad happy birthday. I could even sense my dad was a little nervous because what is my son going to do jokes now in front of everybody? And if it doesn't go well, and it's what,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I said, well, I brought a friend with me from New York who wanted to come up and tell some jokes. And then Henny comes down the stairs of the basement with his loud jacket and the violin.
Oh my God.
And my dad at first, I'm sure, thought like, what if one of his friends going to do an impression? And so when he saw him like come down to the bottom of the stairs, he like shot up and spun around and, like he couldn't believe it. And Henny just shows up. He's almost in his face, the violin. And I got a son, 18 years old, 19 if I let him. And did like 15 minutes.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Were people going crazy? I mean, everybody's been going crazy.
Yeah. It was
Wow.
really special. And he talked about it for the rest of his life.
That is like one of the greatest gifts I've ever heard somebody give their parent. That's spectacular, Mike. That's spectacular. Wow.
On his deathbed, and when he was in hospice, his wife at the time, when I was going to be alone with my dad, she said, "Can you read the scriptures to him?" And then she left the room, and I put the scriptures aside, went to a Henny Youngman joke book on the phone, and one of the last things my dad heard was his son rattling off Henny Youngman jokes.
I love it. Okay, so was there anything else before comedy, before you realized the power of comedy? Was it when you were a little kid, was there anything else you wanted to do, or was this it from the get-go?
I wanted to learn how to fix TVs.
Oh, because?
It's my grandfather did it. I was intrigued by it. I think ultimately I wanted my own TV for myself. So maybe that's why I wanted to fix it. I'm not sure exactly. But I watched my grandfather do it, and he really didn't know what he was doing. He was kind of self-taught. He would just bang a radio around and try to get it to work. And I said, "Oh, I could do that." So when I took tests for college, I was sort of deemed not college material. I don't know who decided that, and I ended up going to a technical high school. So I learned how to fix TVs and radios and stuff like that in high school. Mm-hmm. And then out of high school, I got a job working for NASA. I worked on the space shuttle.
You what?
Yes.
Doing what exactly?
Well, if you want to know exactly, we built these components called transducers. And they took fuel and air pressure and converted them into digital readouts. And I had to do all the testing and circuit shunt building to keep them within proper tolerances under certain heat and cold.
Now, was this something you were already doing stand-up, I assume, when you were doing it? Were you doing stand-up yet?
Yeah, I did it starting in high school. Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay, so I would assume once you started doing stand-up, you'd already made the decision that that's what you wanted to do. Is that so?
It's funny, it's an interesting thing that I think a lot of people hit in life, this certain pivot point, this kind of line of demarcation where I think, and I wonder where, there's a lot of kids throughout their childhood who say, I'm going to be a professional basketball player, I'm going to be a rock star, I'm going to be a comedian. Mm-hmm. So we all kind of have these flights of fancy that you're allowed to have at that age, And so I started doing stand-up and liking it and having a tiny bit of success. I mean, just locally. And then I got that job at NASA. So then you hit that line of like, well, here's an opportunity to start my real life. You know what I mean? Like, this is what's supposed to happen. You put your fantasy aside. You put aside I'm not going to be in professional sports. I'm not going to be a, astronaut. I'm not, you go, here's a job in engineering. I still had my high school girlfriend. You know, it's like that path was like, okay, that's the way it's supposed to happen. And I started to accept that.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next. Were you okay with that? Could you see your life playing out that way?
Well, I started to because I thought that's what's supposed to happen because especially in a small town, you talk to people about, yeah, I want to be on TV, and they're like, yeah, sure. You know, like it doesn't seem like you're really going to do it, you know, so you don't really quite believe it yet. So I just started to go on that path. But then the stand-up thing just kept nagging at me. I had no control over it, you know? So you just, you know, it makes me wonder how many people have that moment and then decide I can't do that because it's so crazy, so I have to do this,
Right.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then
what tipped you over, Mike? Like when you were first doing comedy, were you coming into the city or were you doing it in Connecticut?
just in Connecticut. No, this was 1977, 78. So there was no comedy boom. There were no comedy clubs. It wasn't like, you know, it got to the point if you had like a car wash or a ice cream store, they would convert it into a, you know. So what I did, I was whatever 17, I would go into a bar that had a band, and I would ask the manager, I said, when they go on a break, can I just go up and tell jokes?
Get out of here. You're very ballsy. Yeah.
I think, and I hope my sons get this thing of whatever they want to do, where you just are so driven and so sure of what you want to do, you're going to do whatever it takes to get there, you know?
And how would that work out? So you'd go into a bar, you say, can I do a few jokes? When it's out of context like that, would people laugh? Could you get them? Could you get the audience?
Most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my act is I would do these stupid vocal impressions.
I was going to add, that was my next question. So what kind of comedy were you doing at the beginning?
Well, those kind of things would get their attention.
Like give us an example.
I can't do it on a microphone, but I would do a siren noise, right? In fact, as a kid, I was able to do it so loud that I hang out in the corner with my friends. I'd do it and cars would pull over. They loved that. So I would kind of incorporate that into jokes and stuff like that and grab their attention. It's funny, I don't remember my act that much.
Well, it's
from
a few years ago. That's all right.
It was.
Well, I remember something from your book that I believe is what sparked you to realize that you were funny. I don't want to prompt you, but it was a story about getting bullied, as I recall.
Oh yeah. Well, it was just another clear example of like the power of humor, mm-hmm. where this bully just decided he was going to, you know, on my way home from school, was going to be waiting for me somewhere on my path home.
Were you a little kid? Were you runty or something?
Grammar school. I wasn't little, I don't think. No.
So why would a bully?
I was vulnerable, I guess. So he finally had me, you know, like it was finally that moment. And he's like, I forgot exactly what happened, but it's like, now it's time for me to kick your ass. And it was almost by accident. I was like Woody Allen. I was like, okay, but can I go home and change my pants? They're new. And if I get them dirty, my mom will get mad at me. And he laughed so much that he just kind of shoved me on the shoulder and then left and then never bothered me again.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have to take a segue here. Speaking of Woody Allen, so I worship the man and saw him on Broadway and played against Sam every movie. I mean, just worship the man. And I believed him and didn't believe Mia. And then I thought she was cranky. And then I watched the documentary, Allen versus Farrow. Have you seen it?
Yes and no. I saw, first of all, I should clarify that I have friends who are friends with Woody Allen, pretty close friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of heard everything as it was unfolding at times, or sort of this second wave of when it was unfolding.
Okay.
And first of all, Woody Allen didn't even quite pay attention to it because he would thought it was so ridiculous. I mean, he's going to say what he's going to say, but uh, they were able to tell me kind of the details that they understood, not only from what came from Woody Allen, but was actual court testimony, court documents, investigations, other investigations. So the problem with the Mia documentary is that it only tells one side of the story.
Well, because he didn't want to do it.
Right, but that's because he already told it. And he also knew that she still had complete control over the documentary, so it would not be good for him to do it, because then it could even make it worse because a lot of it was manipulated. So in other words, like, I know I only made it as far as it proved to me it was bullshit when, this is just me personally, when as soon as they started, like, they had home video of him playing with the kids the way a dad plays with kids, but then they slow it down and play like the horror music, and it's like, no, can't. So we'll never know exactly what happened. But the fact that it was proven so many times in so many different ways by so many different factions that it didn't happen, that I'm going to lean in that direction. I mean, why would the courts let him and his wife adopt kids, you know? So, and, you know, I mean, it's such a, you know, the other thing I understand about people who do that, it's like, it's people who do that, it never happens just once, you know? So it's extremely complicated, and in truth, I never, you know, I'm more apt to listen to people who are close to him and can point to documentation than I would to someone who's angry with him, you know, and who has complete control over that documentary. But I know so many people now are going to look at it and really believe that he's guilty.
There were a couple of really damning things. One of them was he's on the phone with Mia, and he gets a call in from his attorney, and he said, he's saying to Mia, yeah, I'm not recording it. I don't know how to record. And then he's saying to his attorney, oh yeah, I'm recording her, don't worry. And then he's kind of pumping her to say things. And there was a lot of manipulation going on both sides.
Right. Because, like, I don't fully understand the naked pictures he had of her.
Of Sugi?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Okay, so let's move on from Woody, and while we're here, so you're friends with Louis C.K. You've known Louis from the beginning of your careers. How did that? What was that like? What did you feel about that?
Well,
or did you feel about that?
You know, first, I didn't know Louis that much personally. We did sort of hang out together with other comics at bars, you know, friends' apartments and stuff like that. So it was always kind of a superficial but fun, you know.
Right.
But you know, he's just kind of a weird dude. I have a feeling what happened really happened. You know, I don't know. Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, the other weird thing to think about that, though, is like, if it were the 70s and he was a rock star, it's like that stuff happens every night, you know. Not that that's an excuse, but, you know, and maybe his head somehow thought it wasn't as serious or something. I don't know how in other words, I've certainly never been in that part of his head, so I don't know.
Okay, so Cindy Beagle, I was telling you earlier, Cindy Beagle wrote on a lot of sitcoms of Gary Marshall shows, and she was asking me to ask you, have the writers' rooms changed? Like, are there women that write on these animated kind of very guy kind of centric shows?
Yes. Yes. Um, there's a couple of things. The writer's room is kind of the safe place to say anything you want. Obviously, you can't be racist, and you can't insult someone in a dirty way. There's a fun way to insult people, but the language, in my experience, can be foul. You can say the raunchiest, stupidest things because we're comedy writers. So it's not funny to us unless it's like beyond the joke. You know what I mean? It's never serious.
Right.
But the rooms I've been in, the people have been respectful in certain ways anyway. I've never encountered a situation. We've had women writers. I really have not encountered a situation where people have been inappropriate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
There's always some harsh insults, but in a fun way. But
right.
So, and it's weird. I feel like the Trailer Park Boys, they are those guys. But
yes, they are.
That's their life. That's how they live their lives. I mean, I would go out drinking with those guys, and I'm living the show with them. But that's a blast. But that's hard because it was just me and those guys pretty much writing the show. So that was the extent of that. Mm-hmm. But I hear interesting stories. On a black show, one of the black writers used the N-word as it's just part of his vernacular. Mm-hmm. And then was called into HR. And he's like, I'm black, And I don't remember the outcome, but I think he left the show because he's like, I can't,
Wow.
The cancel culture is getting it's a little scary sometimes. If people are going to be taken down from a tweet they did, 14 years ago, it's a little sketchy, that kind of stuff. But
these animated shows, you guys, like, it's anything. I mean, you guys are so over the top of pushing limits.
Well,
like, there's no such thing as political correctness in animated comedy.
I'm trying to understand that because I'm even lost in it, because you think of the roasts.
Yeah.
Those are awful. In fact, I guess it's been a couple of years since we've done like a true roast. The last one was, I think, Bruce Willis. But that was 4 years ago. But for some reason you're allowed, and I don't know if it's the context, you can just do any hardcore racist, homophobic, and nobody says anything, right? So right. Why are you allowed to do it there? But then you did a tweet in 2001 about a sex thing, and you can't host the Oscars now. It's weird to know the rules,
Mm-hmm. I agree. All right, so let's go back. So you're doing stand-up. You're working for NASA. How do you decide to ditch the steady job? And
well, it's funny how fates sometimes step in.
Mm-hmm.
Right when I was trying to figure out what I was doing with my life, I heard on the radio that they're having a stand-up comics competition in Hartford, Connecticut. Like, what? And the prize was dinner for two and a limo to New York City to audition at the Improv. I'm like, I could, what? Because I already had learned about the Improv and started trying to figure out what is this magical place that I see, like Freddie Prinze co-hosting Mike Douglas, and he's showing clips from the Improv Club. And in fact, one of these nights that I went on stage at a bar in Connecticut,
Mhm.
there was the band was this Italian, like Louis Prima band, this really fun, the singer was pulling people from the audience, dancing around. It was just this fun thing. And it was Nicopaolo Forte from the Woody Allen movie. And I found out he was from my hometown. And then he talked to me after the show, and he was the first to talk about the Improv and his club. And I think you should go there. And, so then, yeah, this contest shows up, and I'm like, well, I got to do it. I got to, and I won the contest, auditioned at the Improv, and then passed auditions.
Wow.
And
And who were the comics? Who were the regular comics at the time that you?
I remember Joe Piscopo was MC.
Mhm.
I saw Rick Overton that night get a standing ovation at the little Improv club, which I think that's the only time I've seen anyone get a standing ovation.
Wow.
Gilbert, when his eyes were still open.
Were they?
And he wasn't yelling.
Wow.
I remember he picked up like a stack of napkins, right? And then it was flipping through like a book.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, the Bible. And he goes to the back. About the author. Jesus was born in Brooklyn. Just do a whole run. And you flip the pages like this. And as you can see a fat lady with a hula hoop. But, so yeah, that night was very powerful. And Fred Stoller was about my age, maybe younger.
Mm-hmm.
Doing his, my mother says my brothers are better than me in this, my brother's better than me in that. I don't have a brother.
Fred's done the living room a couple times. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
But and also, like, weren't those the days, or was that before, that Larry David would go up and like nobody would laugh at him?
Well, Larry, first of all, whenever Larry would go on stage, there had to be a comic ready to go on at any minute. I saw Larry walk on stage and then kind of look in the audience and go, nope, not tonight, and then leave. And then at one point, some lady just in the front just kept laughing and laughing, and then he just turned and goes, "What are you laughing at?" Yelling at her for laughing. And one night I'm in the bar, and he's killing on stage.
Oh, I didn't think he did kill. Every
Yeah.
story I've heard is that he was not very well received.
No, once in a while when he caught a wave, it was like, it's Larry, I'm very good at masturbating. Maybe he had a whole bit. I am the great masturbator. People would come fill Yankee Stadium to see Larry the masturbator. And so I'm in the bar, and he's off stage. He's coming off stage, and the audience still applauds. But he hits the bar, and they can still hear. I go, Larry, they're still applauding in there. He goes, oh, listen how they're applauding.
That's very funny. So, okay, so you passed the Improv. You're still working at NASA. So what happens here?
I was.
Are you married? Are you single? What are you doing?
Well, I still had my high school girlfriend in Connecticut. And the relationship was still great. Although starting to change, because it's weird. At 17, there's so much you don't know, obviously. But instincts start to kick in, so she could see like I was going on a road that probably was not going to be a road for her. And I suspected the same thing, and then somehow we just naturally broke up. It just one day we're like, it was almost like an honest discussion of like this, we can kind of see what's happening here. So that was it was a 2-year high school thing. So that was a rough breakup.
Right.
I would go to New York. I would drive from Connecticut once a week to take an improv class in the improv.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to know people and see how it's run and all that sort of stuff. And there was a bartender there, 75-year-old, really heavy man, kind of looked like Alfred Hitchcock. And at some point I said, I'm just going to start looking for an apartment. I think it's time for me to come out here. And he goes, well, I have an apartment across the street. In the meantime, you could stay on my couch until you find something. And I'm like, oh shit, jerks, I'm coming to New York, and great way to start your life, 18 into the crack infested West Side, So it was weird when I was hanging out at the improv. It's like, oh, you're staying with Al? There was like weird things started, like, oh, you're the one with Al. And I'm like, what's going on? So I kind of found out when one night I come home after hanging out with comics at 2 or 3 in the morning, getting my dusty couch ready, to go to sleep, and then Al in the bedroom right next to the living room, he starts screaming from his bed. It's like, oh my God, there's a ghost. I'm like, what? Right in front of you, there's a ghost. Can you see him? I'm like, no, what? Like, what does he want? There's a ghost in front of you. And I'm like, I don't see a ghost. He goes, well, he's gone. The ghost is gone. He's like panic. He's ghost is gone. And then there's like a weird pause, and he goes, if you're scared and you want to come in here, there's plenty of room in the bed. And it's funny, my young face still didn't understand what had happened. I didn't get it.
You didn't go into the bed, did you?
No, I didn't do that. I knew that, and I think I stayed there for another 6 months.
Wow.
Breaking the poor man's heart, I guess.
Oh.
Because it wasn't until like 3 years after I moved, I was hanging out with some people at the club, and I wrote up the story about the gay guy and the ghost. And then one of the waitresses started laughing hysterically. And I go, what? He goes, well, he's gay. And I went, oh, like I was so dumb. I was, I was
so naive, Mike. Isn't that lovely? So, all right. So you break up with the girlfriend, you move into the city, you're doing comedy. This is when this is like the start of the boom, right?
Yeah. We didn't quite know it yet. I mean, I was kind of there just before.
Right.
It was an interesting time for stand-up, at least at New York at the Improv, because every act was very different, very distinct. Like there was Mark Wiener. I don't know if you heard of Mark Wiener, who had these homemade puppets, sort of these dark, dirty puppets.
I don't know Mark Wiener.
Yeah. Jimmy Brogan.
Yes, I know Jimmy.
He just did audience stuff. The whole set was just audience stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Richie Morris. You probably don't know Richie Morris. He was a writer, Letterman, the morning show, but he was this really odd, like an odd genius.
Mm.
The first night I saw him, he had like plastic Ziploc bags and a bread bag, and he wore them, like put them on his head and did like a fashion show. And it was just like, he'd go, you like? And then he would go back and flip them around and, you like? And
it sounds familiar to me, but I don't know, maybe not. Yeah.
And then Gilbert was his own, and Overton. I mean, just very different, very interesting points of views. There were odd comedy teams, I remember back then. And like that wave was moving out just as I came in. Ronnie Shakes, I don't know, you probably don't remember Ronnie Shakes. He was amazing, one-liners. And Seinfeld wasn't around that much yet. He was more at the comic strip, but he'd come in
Right.
once in a while.
And it was, New York was very divided that way with the improv and the strip, and because Gabe was all comic strip, and
You know what it is? It's just hard to get across town where, for me, the West Side was at one point pretty amazing because I remember doing 11 shows in one night.
how did you do that?
It started on the Upper West Side. There's a place called Stand Up New York.
Oh yeah.
Start there, shoot down to the Improv. And then Caroline's was on 8th Avenue. Keep going downtown to the Village. There was the Comedy Cellar, the Boston Comedy Club, the Village Gate. And I did open for a lot of acts at the Bottom Line.
Wow.
And then sometimes it worked where then I can go back uptown and start over again and go down again. It
Wow.
took a lot of curation of schedule, but
How did you subway? How did you get around?
it had to be cabs, otherwise I just wouldn't make it.
So how are you guys making money? I mean, because those sets were like peanuts, right? They were like $25 sets or something. Not even $5, I think, at the Comedy Cellar when.
Well, first of all, my rent was $340 a month.
Okay.
And I was in Midtown Manhattan. It's pretty crazy.
Wow.
The studio, it was a good sized studio. And I think on the weekends, I could make a few hundred on the weekends if I really, scramble.
Did you stay in the city, or did you do those like Scarpati gigs? Did you go out and do the gigs outside of the city, or no?
I did the one-nighters in Jersey. I tried going on the road and I just didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a mess. Stuff like I remember like working in Atlanta or something, and they put me in this great old hotel. I go, all right, this is cool. And then the other act on the show came to me and said, look, I need the money. So I told the booker that I'm not staying in my room, so I can get the money that would be spent on the room. He would give me the money. He said, but I don't have a place to stay. Can I stay in your room with you?
What?
And I'm like, oh God. I didn't know how to say no. I mean, I was like, his hat in hand, and I'm like, it's like, it'll be okay. You won't even know I'm here. And I go, all right. And then he goes out in the hall and comes back in with his wife and kid.
Oh my God. Wow.
But I tried to, it's interesting. I tried to go across town and try to work, see if I can go back and forth, but it's just too hard.
Mm-hmm.
And during the boom, it was, again, anybody who had a building tried turning into a comedy club. So there was a strip club that decided they wanted to do comedy, change its venue, but it didn't really put a lot of effort in it. The poles were still there, and the mirrored floor, and you can still reeked of cheap perfume. And
What club was that?
it was called Rags to Riches. It didn't last long, and I was there when it first opened.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't want to. The owner saw me at the Improv and says, "Come and do my club," like this old school, like gangster kind of like a Joe Pesci guy. Yeah. Come over across town, come do. I go, I don't really like to. Just come check it out. And I'm like, yeah. And they go, you don't want to do my club? Like he's like threatening me now. I'm like, okay, I guess so. And so I do the trek across town, and on the stage there were 2 life-size stuffed clowns on either side of you, and they would spin on these motors. These spinning clowns. You hear the whirring of them, like Slovakia on Times Square. And I show up and there's nobody there. There's no audience. And I'm already have my curated night scheduled, and I exactly knew it was gonna happen. And the Joe Pesci guy's like pacing, and he's pissed off, and his buddy at the bar with the bad hairpiece, he's like, oh, Joey, what the hell, And I'm like, I don't want to say anything because he'll probably take me in the alley and beat the shit out of me. So I'm just waiting, see what he's going to do. And then he just, at one point, it's like almost a half hour and nobody's there. And he looks in the room and he looks at his partner. He looks up on the stage and he just goes, Joey, shut off the clowns.
Shut off the clowns.
Uh,
I used to work at a place on the east side called Good Times in Rocco. This sounds like a Rocco story. Did you know Rocco from Good Times?
I worked there twice, maybe.
Hmm.
Here's what I remember about Good Times. I worked there once, and then they shut down for renovations.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back, and they painted the rug, the wall-to-wall rug, black. They just painted it.
I don't even remember that. That's
Yeah.
hysterical. All that,
What years were you there?
85, 86.
Okay.
I had a very short-lived run.
Oh. And did you go to other places?
No, but I was running around everywhere, and I was just brand new with my 5 minutes. But then I did a show for Gabe at the Rock and Roll Cafe. I did the opening spot, and I ended up becoming a rock and roll promoter and running that and booking that club, and my whole life changed from there. So
Oh, wow.
it just was kind of one of those things. But so how did you segue from, so you're making like 300 and something a week, and you have a cheap apartment, but you're ambitious and you're doing a lot. How does it end up, how does the door open for you?
Has the door opened yet?
Because you don't want to go on the road. I mean, it's hard to be a stand-up and not be willing to go on the road. So did you know you wanted to segue to television? Was that always the thing?
Well, yeah, because I'm 25 or whatever, and I'm already like, well, I don't like going on the road. So what happens when I'm 50? Because I'm not. I knew then I'm not going to be Robert Klein. I'm not going to be George Carlin. So what happens? But I already had started writing. Let's see if I can tell this.
Before we get to this, tell us, what was your act like when you were no longer green? You were doing 11 shows a night. Were you an observational? What was your thing?
I think it was more silly and dry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of my favorite things to do was I would pretend to kind of stop for a second and go, I kind of like, I don't know if this is a good time to bring this up, but I'd like to talk about for a second, just I'm doing a lot of great work with the Balloon Animal Adoption Center. But the most fun part for me for that bit was when people would laugh, I would just look at them like,
why are you laughing?
Why would you laugh at that? And then I would try to continue, like, because we do a lot of great, just like deadpan,
Uh-huh.
we do a lot of great work there. We get deformed balloon animals off the streets. They got deflated limbs and big genitalia, and we don't have the ceiling space for these animals. And if we don't get them adopted, we pop them. We do, and needlessly, tens of thousands are popped every year. But when I was a kid, when I was 17, I would record comedians on TV with my little recorder and take the jokes apart and try to understand what they're funny.
So who were the comics that were impacting you? Who were your favorite comics?
Well, my favorite was Rodney Dangerfield. And as a kid, I'm doing, jokes about my wife and my, but they're jokes. But right. So one night, after Rodney did his set, sits down with Johnny, and there was a moment where he was really talking about his real life, which he never does. But he talked about his club in Manhattan called Dangerfields, which I didn't know about. And then he talked about when he started stand-up, he went by the name of Jack Roy. So my little gears in my vocational school head started spinning. And I said, I know his jokes and his style so well. I'm going to write a page of jokes and send them to Jack Roy at Dangerfields in New York. So I got my mom's big manual typewriter and hunt and pecked, a page of jokes.
How old are you?
17, I think. Maybe 17.
Uh-huh.
And sent them to him. And, of course, weeks go by and I'm like, I even kind of forgot. And then one day after dinner, I'm down in my finished off basement bedroom, phone rings and my mom's at the top of the stairs. She's like, Mike, there's a Rodney on the phone for you.
Oh, stop.
Like, what? And then it's like, yeah, hello. Hey, Mike, it's Rodney. How you doing? You okay? You all right? How are you? Hey, I'm like, I got your jokes. They're pretty good. They're all right. And I'm like, holy, what? I'm do you like my jokes? Yeah, but they're not for me. But they're good. I like, And he kept me on the phone for 15 minutes, and I said I want to do stand up. He was telling me about Catch and all the clubs, and don't come to my club. It's no good, And so that again was another validation of like, holy shit, I guess I'm onto something. I don't know.
Did you sell jokes to comics
Yeah.
in your career?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until later that I went back to Rodney after I moved into New York, and I called him. I didn't remind him of, a couple of years before. He never would have remembered, but
right.
And I called him. I said, hey, I got some jokes. Are you buying? And he says, yeah, come on over. And I'm like, and I didn't have any jokes. I kind of cornered myself to like, so I'm like,
come on over.
So Rodney's waiting, and I'm like, I spent a couple days just on my yellow notepad, just scribbling out. And then I go to his club. I think it was the middle of the day. I don't know. But he has this windowless, dressing room in the basement at his club. And I'm maybe 18, 19. But I'm pitching my jokes to him, and he's pacing in his blue robe. He's wearing his.
I was going to say the robe and slippers. It has to be the robe and slippers.
Yeah. And I'm not scoring at all. I'm like, my wife, I don't want to tell you. And he's like, oh. And then at one point he stops, and I'm like, maybe did I hit this? And then he turns and then starts peeing in the sink. Like, I don't know, give me a toilet in here, I got to pee in the sink. I'm like, well, I guess I'm in showbiz now. Is that how?
Rodney wasn't one of the people you sold jokes to.
I didn't. I think I sold one or two, but I kind of moved on, and I don't know if it was because people kind of found me. Mm-hmm. Rip Taylor. Wow.
I just went to his memorial, like right before COVID.
Yeah. Mm. It was funny. I because of my technical high school training, mm-hmm. I worked at an AV repair shop in New York, and I got fired. And then I thought, well, I'm sunk. My life's over. And then that day, I got called to do a thing called Dial a Joke. You ever hear of Dial a Joke?
Yes, I remember Dial a Joke.
And people pay $2 a minute or something, and a comedian would tell you jokes, and it's like, really, you're gonna call and hear Mike Rowe? What? But the guy who did Dial a Joke said, well, we got Rip Taylor, and he wants to do a bunch of sessions. So do you want to write his Dial a Jokes? So I ended up writing those for him, and then I had just got fired, and then those were like, it was like $1,200, and that was like, holy cow, is that my year's salary? So yeah, I was trying to think who else. Byron Allen was buying jokes, somehow writing for him. I don't remember who else.
So then how does this now, how do you end up writing for television? How did that happen?
Part of it was learning as a comedian. Mm-hmm. You're home all day doing nothing. And I more and more thought about, because I was having success writing jokes, mm-hmm. making some money, it was almost like printing money. It was like, to me, it was like, so wait, you give me $50 for the, And I just became more intrigued of how sitcom works and writing.
Mike, had you studied writing? Had you studied screenwriting? Did you have training?
No. In fact, I hardly read any books in my youth, mm-hmm. So I had a lot of catching up to do. So Yeah, I became more and more intrigued by that. I stumbled onto a show in Manhattan Cable in 1980 called The Uncle Floyd Show.
Oh my God.
Do you know The Uncle Floyd
Of
Show?
course, Uncle Phil, he did my Rock and Roll Cafe, and Jimmy Vivino, his brother, has done my stuff, and the Vivinos are wonderful. Yes.
Uh, Uncle Floyd just got over COVID. Floyd Vivino. He had a
Oh.
hard time with it. I'm not even sure if he's fully recovered at this point.
Mhm.
But when I stumbled onto the show,
Mhm.
it, like, I fell in love with it instantly, and I would just watch it religiously
Mhm.
to the point like, well, maybe I can send him some sketches and actually try writing sort of scripted things.
Uh-huh.
And I did the same thing I did with Rodney. I called him. I said, I got sketches. Could I send them over? And he goes, yeah, well, we can't pay you. But I'm like, so I didn't have any sketches. So I wrote some.
Okay, wait, Mike, how did you do that? Okay, so you don't have training. Did you research it? Did you just put pen to paper? What did you do?
The thing I remember there was a Saturday Night Live book that was out, like an oversized book, and it had
Mhm.
script page samples in it.
Uh-huh.
And that was like, I'm going to use that format. I'll just type it like that. Which, funny, it was the wrong format. They just made it that way so it would fit in the book. But that's how I sent him stuff. And he liked it and invited me down to the studio in the middle of Newark, New Jersey, in the middle of the night, and getting off the PATH train. It's, wasn't particularly pretty, but
Mhm.
but I ended up, and I still have all the videotape of it. I probably wrote 3 hours worth of stupid Uncle Floyd sketches, but it was the first place where I taught myself how to write, at least what felt funny to me.
Wow.
It was, if people don't know the show, it was kind of a 1960s kids show, but for stoners.
It was kind of like a Soupy Sales-ish
Yeah.
thing, kind of, right?
hmm
Mm-hmm.
Which was kind of special for me because that was the first thing I remember laughing at when I was a little kid was the Soupy Sales show. So it was kind of an interesting full circle. And then it wasn't until I found an actual script from Hollywood. I found an old script in a bookstore, in a used bookstore. And that was, at that point, it was like finding the holy grail. I was
Do
like,
you remember what it was a script for?
it was a Whit Thomas show called You're a Big Girl Now. I don't know. But
Okay.
it was the same writer that created Golden Girls.
Oh, wow.
Um, so to find a script it kind of demystified a lot of things. You know what I mean? You see it on the page, and right away it has all the clues of like act breaks. There's an act break every whatever page, and there's how many jokes per page, and
Right.
And so I just went at it. My favorite shows then were the Newhart, Vermont show, and It's Gary Shandling show came out.
Oh.
And so I used those shows to teach myself to write. So I wrote like 2 of the Newhart shows, and I wrote like 3 of the It's Gary Shandling shows just to learn how to do it. But around that time, I was working freelance on Weekend Update, on Dennis Miller's Weekend Update. And I got to know Alan Zweibel, who was hanging around at the time.
Love Alan.
And we kind of connected because we had the love for the old school comics and that sort of thing. And so, again, fate, I had a Saturday Night Live sweatshirt one night, and I'm walking through Times Square, and somebody walks past me, and they go, "Hey, nice shirt." And it was Alan. And I just hadn't seen him in a while. And he goes, "Are you still writing? What are you doing?" And I just said, well, coincidentally, I wrote 3 It's Gary Shandling show scripts. And Alan was the co-creator of the show. And he said, well, send me your best one. I can't promise you anything, but, so then he called me and really liked it and hooked me up with a manager. His name was Barry Secunda, and he had he managed all the original Saturday Night Live writers.
Uh-huh.
He was a New York manager, and then I ended up working on Alan Zweibel's next show that people don't really remember. It was called The Boys, and The Boys was about the Friars Club, and it had all these old time comedians, Jackie Gale, Norm Crosby.
Wow.
Who else? Alan Garfield was in it. Geez, I forget who else. Who was the neighbor on Three's Company? The older guy.
Oh,
Yeah, that guy. But anyway, it was all these old time guys.
Jack. Anyway, it'll come to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was my entree into Hollywood. He hired me for my first job in Hollywood. I literally got off the plane from New York, and the next day I got my first job on a sitcom. And
I know that you worked on Coach. The year that you were there, was Phil Rosenthal there when you were there?
I worked on 3 shows with Phil.
Okay, but before you leave this one, did you know Jeremy Stevens?
Yes, very well. Yeah.
He's my life coach, and anyway, I saw that credit and I was like, oh, what else did you work with Phil on?
One of the first show, but the second show I actually worked on was a thing called Baby Talk. Baby Talk starred George Clooney and Julia from Newhart. Who's the girl? Julia. Geez, I forget names always. Anyway, it was Ed Weinberger created it. Ed Weinberger from Mary Tyler Moore and Taxi.
Mm-hmm.
And Phil was there. He had a partner.
Who has since died, and I can't think of his name either.
Phil's partner died?
I believe so. If it's the same one that I'm thinking of, yes.
Wow. Oh, wait, maybe you're thinking of Alan Kirschenbaum.
Yes, I am. It's not Alan Kirschenbaum that you're
talking about. Alan brought Phil with him on, Alan brought Phil and I on like 3 shows, including Coach. He had like his favorite team. So I forgot what story I was talking, but so Baby Talk with Ed Weinberger, and Ed Weinberger is very mercurial, to say the least, and got in a fight with George Clooney during the run through. There were scripts flying, and it was like
wow.
And we had to wrangle Ed. We went up into the offices. And it's like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And Ed is circling, and he's angry. And he's going, I'm going to have his legs broken. I just have to do it.
Oh my God.
I have to do it. And Alan, bless his heart, it took him a half hour to talk him down. You can't. So that night, we stayed up late and wrote a script where suddenly George Clooney is moving to Africa. That was the compromise.
Oh my God. But wasn't he the star? Was he not the star of the show?
Well, he was, yes, he was one of the stars, but he was like, the lead actress had a baby and she was single, and he was the carpenter who's been working on her apartment nonstop with Bill Hickey.
Sure.
Bill Hickey, who, hit on Clooney a lot. I ran into George Clooney a couple years ago, and we kind of picked up where he left off. Like that show, he said that, and I have this distinction, they said that was the worst show business experience in my entire career, even after a fist fight with David O. Russell on Three Kings.
Oh my God. Ed Weinberger was supposed to do My Living Room with Ed Asner. They co-wrote a book, and Weinberger didn't show up that day. We never did find out why. He just didn't. But.
Well, Ed is like, I remember we're in his office and we're all pitching a story, and Ed's pacing, and I remember he's eating corn chips and leaving a trail. And then in the middle of a pitch, we're like, so what about that? And Ed just kind of walks out the door, and we're waiting because did he go to the bathroom? And then we're kind of pitching a little more, and like half hour goes by, and like 45 minutes, and then finally we asked his assistant, "Where's Ed?" "Oh, he went home." Just walks out in the middle of it.
Wow. So these experiences, how was it working on Coach?
Well, Coach was pretty amazing. It was like, season 7, it was still top 20.
Mm-hmm.
Still made a ton of money for ABC. This was at a time when networks were still huge.
Right.
So it was just like Phil was a foodie then.
Right.
So we would order our lunches from around the country.
What?
We would order the day before, like, all right, what are we getting? We're getting crabs from Maryland. And then they'd call the place. We're getting muffalettas from New Orleans. Great. And they would show up the next morning. That place was like.
How come I've never seen you at pizza and movie night? I used to go every Sunday to pizza movie night. I don't think I've ever seen
I think since I got a big screen in my house, I have my own pizza movie night with my wife now.
Gotcha.
I used to go all the time. I went more often with it when he was at his other house.
I was going to say, you must have been those early days when it was just around his living room TV, right?
Well, yeah, even when he had his apartment and it was, pillows on the floor and, yeah, I should go more. I started to go a little bit more before the pandemic, but.
So you did Coach, and where'd you go from there? Oh, Becker, you did the Ted Danson show.
Yeah.
How was that?
Ted Danson was great and amazing. He, that's better. Look at that. It doesn't look like I'm under a heat lamp at McDonald's anymore. Ted Danson had Lucille Ball's dressing room at one time. So it was like a 3-room suite.
Mm-hmm.
And he opened it up to the writers and the cast and put in a pool table and big screen TVs and a full bar. And it was like he made it our hangout.
Wow.
So that was cool. That was another hard show for me because it's always weird. Like I never watched the show, and I got the job, and it wasn't necessarily a show I would watch. So it's always hard because it's like, well, we'll give you a lot of money to be here and write for us, and kind of knowing like I may not know how to do that. There are some writers, I guess, that can walk into any situation and know exactly how to write for it. But if I'm in a place where I don't connect, it just becomes really difficult. And I had a hard time there.
Mm-hmm.
If you just don't, yeah.
What was the best experience? Where did you walk in and like as soon as you walked in, you were like, "This is it. I'm home. These are my people."
Futurama.
Mm-hmm.
I was there for 6 or 7 seasons because, in fact, the show was canceled 3 times, I think. And during one of those hiatuses, I went to Family Guy, and I felt like I'm not connecting. I don't feel like I'm connecting. So, luckily, Futurama got picked up again, so I was able to jump and go there. So that was great. It was just everybody was so smart, and it's like how I'm with all these Harvard guys, and I went to 2 years of high school and 2 years of shop. How did I get here?
No, I was going to say that when you first were saying that you didn't go to college, I was like, God, every writer I know, like from Gabe's experiences, they were all Harvard guys. He was like the only guy that wasn't a Harvard guy.
Part of it was in my meeting with Matt Groening and David Cohen. They liked my script enough to bring me in, but then once I told them I worked for NASA and worked on the space shuttle, that was like the final, like, all right, so your office will be over there. And, and I think they ultimately liked me too, because I was sort of more of a joke guy for them. But I also was more of the emotional guy. I brought up, as much emotional moments, for them that they weren't, as as well versed in. They were more scientific approach.
I can feel that in the writing of your memoir, so I get that. So okay, so with the current stuff that you're doing now, well, I mean, you're only going to say good stuff about this, but so how are you feeling about what you're doing now?
I'm not even sure what I'm doing now, but
Trailer Park Boys, you're doing
that stuff. Trailer Park Boys. And here's an interesting distinction. If there's writers listening or whatever, because if you look at Trailer Park Boys, it's certainly filthy. And literally every third word is fuck.
Mhm.
But then you look at something like Paradise PD, and that's wildly filthy. But it was much more interesting for me to write for Trailer Park Boys because even deep down, though, it was really about the people, the characters driving the story. Where Paradise PD is not so much. It's kind of this quilt of shit and fuck jokes, Not that the Trailer Park Boys isn't, but there's some sort of heart there, So in other words, rather than a story of them just robbing a liquor store, they would rob the liquor store because one of the daughters wants their own trailer. So he wants to help get the money for, So it makes them lovable.
So speaking of lovable and dads, tell us about your kids. I know you have you have twins. And so what are your twins up to in this COVID world? How old are your twins?
They're 20, identical twins. I wanted to name them Martin and Lewis, but my wife wanted no part of that. But I'm like, Marty and Lou. They're what, my friend Eddie Gordetsky. Do you know Eddie Gordetsky?
I don't.
Oh, okay. But he offered my wife $5,000 if she went along with it. Okay.
Isn't your dog's name Marty Allen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, people who know Alan and Rossi, there's probably not that many people.
Oh God, I do. Yeah.
Anyway, I forgot what I was saying.
You were talking about your boys, about your twins.
Yeah. They kind of grew up in my environment a little bit. I mean, they would actually sit at the table with me at table reads at Futurama, stuff like that.
Oh God, that must have been a kid's wet dream, that whole thing you were doing.
Yeah, and to be, 10 years old and get to talk to Matt Groening about like, why are the Simpsons yellow? And
yeah.
Matt Matt still has these 4th of July parties, and we'd bring the families, and my sons, who were probably 6, first thing they do, they go in his house and throw up in his living room. And then Matt has sons, so Matt instinctively just cleaned it up, and there's like, oh, Matt Groening's cleaning up my son's vomit. That's great. But so yeah, it's part of their world a little bit. And
did they know that they were moving in did they think that's what everybody's dad did, or did they know they were in a very sacred environment?
I think they knew. That's had some feeling of it. But in fact, my sons had not seen me do stand-up live, and so Vitello's here. Do you know Vitello's?
Sure.
They have the cabaret night. So I said, I'm going to let them see what I did, back then. And they brought all their friends.
Now, wait a minute. How long had it been since you'd done stand-up?
Late 80s, early 90s, late 80s, something like that.
You were going to get up cold after not being up for 20, how many years, and you were just going to do some stand-up?
Yeah, it's interesting because the pressure is different, because you're going into a place where there's nothing to lose, it felt like. It's like if I had that attitude when I was doing it, where it's like, just fuck it, just play, and that's all, If I had that attitude when I was in the heart of it, I probably would have been a celebrity, I think. It's like, I don't, and it luckily went great. And
wow. Did you do like a practice set somewhere, or did you just go up there and do it?
I just did it out loud in my office a few times,
Wow. And did you do your old material, or did you write new stuff?
Mostly the old stuff and probably a couple of new things.
Mhm.
Um,
Wow.
but yeah, Dad was like a hero for a week after that, you know.
They brought all
Um,
their friends?
yeah, yeah. And
You were probably already a dad hero because you worked on Futurama, you worked on Family Guy. I mean, so you're probably already a hero to their friends. Yeah.
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it went great. And then that was a couple years ago. So my son, one of my sons, he was going so crazy at college and found out about a stand-up night in one of the little cabarets there. He started doing stand-up, and he really had that fire and that thing you need to do it, and was able to get in like 2 or 3 times. And then COVID hit, and he really hasn't done it since. And I'm curious, I'm not sure if that fire is still there, but we'll see kind of as the world opens up.
Has he
And
been writing during?
he's been writing scripts. He
Oh,
actually wrote a feature already with his friend,
wow.
and he's doing these little short films and things like that. And because we used to do this thing growing up, when they were growing up, we had these New Year's Eve parties at my house.
Mhm.
And every year I'd have my sons do these little crazy short films. And we would show them at the New Year's Eve party. It became a tradition. Um, so, and, people were supportive and would laugh, and it'd be a great experience for them. And they learn a little bit about how to make little movies. So then it kind of stuck with them. So my other son is now looking to get into production, and he's he's looking for internships and stuff like that. So
What does he want to do in production?
well, that's part of it. He's not sure. He's interviewing people now. It's just starting literally in the last week or so. Now that stuff's opening up.
Uh-huh.
So my wife used to be in production. She worked on Golden Girls.
Oh, wow.
So we still have a lot of connections, obviously. So they get to take advantage of that.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Nepotism is wonderful. And how has COVID been for you as far as your creativity? Like, how is writing? Like, do you have a daily routine?
Yeah. If I'm not on a show, I usually get out into my office. I'll write from like 10 to 3.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly that'll be the end of my day, or sometimes if I'm really in a groove on something, then I'll come back after dinner, at like 8 or 9 at night and work for a couple more hours.
Mm-hmm.
And that's mostly 5 days a week, because I think what's changed during COVID is I'm just generating a lot of projects to develop and pitch, so I'm learning right now that if I'm pitching, I just need to have people attached that are going to get it through the ranks, because I'm not Matt Groening, so that's why I got David Cross attached to this thing, and people it's going to open up more doors.
Right.
So these 2 young guys who want to be writers, who are really good, they were both actors on sitcoms. One was on the Goldbergs and one was on Modern Family.
Mm-hmm.
So they came to me with this idea, an animated idea, and as we're developing it, I go, I think you have a connection to Eric Stone Street. He would be a good voice for this. And then he went to him and said, do you want to, and he's like, let's do it. So, it's like people are going to pay attention,
Right.
Then on top of those 2 guys that were, they weren't the leads in the show, but they were prominent on those sitcoms. So
Mm-hmm.
all that, it just feels like that, at least for me, I need to do that as much as possible. Jason Mraz, when I was pitching Jason Mraz, all the young women executives were like, I think I need to be on this pitch. They screening.
Yeah, I get that. Have you written feature? Is feature writing an interest to you, or is just the thing?
I was toying around with it. I wrote a movie with Bob Odenkirk years ago,
Mm-hmm.
based on me and him and I and David Cross, a couple other people, but mostly Bob and I would we had this reoccurring Friday night movie night of finding the worst, hold on a second. Yeah. We would find the worst Black exploitation movie we could find, and we loved it. We loved those movies. And so we got this idea of like, what if these movie nerds were transported into a Black exploitation movie? Like these nerds were thrown into the 70s world of pimps and, you know, and we ended up selling it to Warner Brothers. It didn't get made.
Wow, nice.
But yeah, so that was cool. And then it's funny, we wrote that so long ago, and then it came up again. Somehow Tyler Perry heard about it. So we had a meeting with Tyler Perry about this crazy Black exploitation, like culturally inappropriate movie. And then he had some weird curiosity about it and then wanted us to hammer it down and make it not as offensive. And then we're like, well, we're not sure what the movie is anymore after that. Mm. So anyway, that was, so yeah, I don't know, I may get into the feature world maybe when I retire or something. I can write some Lifetime movies, or I don't know.
All right, well, you did write a book, so let's talk about that before we go. So It's a Funny Thing, How the Professional Comedy Business Made Me Fat and Bald. So what motivated you writing your, yes, hold it up. That's good, very good.
There were a couple things. Part of it was, you know, I realized I was be on the internet at night, burning like 2 or 3 hours doing nothing, just a lot of empty calories. Mm-hmm. So I was sort of like, what if I instead did something productive during that time and turned the computer off? So that was kind of the first step. And then when I was in Nova Scotia working on the Trailer Park Boys, I'd be in my hotel room for hours with what I'm doing. I go, that was another reason to do it. But then I just heard this thing of like, when you die, all your stories die with you, you know? And there were a lot of these are stories I would tell over and over with friends and stuff like that. And so they were just in me. Mm-hmm. So I decided to write it, but also thought this would be the kind of book that I wish I found when I was 17. You know what I mean? For the young people who are in that moment that I talked about earlier of like, so what if I quit NASA and pursue this dream? What can I expect? What are the kind of things that can happen to me? And how do I handle it? You know? So although my journey would obviously be different from everyone else's, it's still examples of like how one thing leads to the next, how you're going to run into walls and ways you can go around it, or ways to not worry about it because you'll find another door to go through. You know, so I hoped it would be kind of inspirational, and then it feels like it's having the reaction I wanted, which is I'm hearing from young comics that I don't know. They're finding me on Facebook and stuff like that, saying it was really helpful to them and inspiring, and it was, you know, and also hearing from comics and writers that I haven't heard from for years and years, and saying how it, you know, it spoke to them and hit them in a good way, you know. So
before we go, Mike, pick a story. Cherry pick a story that is in there, something that you love, that you've been telling for years, that you can, some story that's gonna leave everybody happy. Yeah, good.
All right. I used to open for a lot of bands at the Bottom Line in New York, which was this fantastic music club. And I'm opening for Kenny G 2 nights on the weekend, 4 shows. And, you know, I'm hanging with Kenny. We're getting to be kind of buddies. And Kenny G, by the way, was great. I mean, when he was started, he was playing more hardcore, like really great, cool jazz. But anyway, he second night after the first show, and the Bottom Line in the back, just 2 big dressing rooms. I had the big dressing room, full bathroom. It was like a little apartment. He had his on the other end. And between shows, I looked down in his dressing room, and he's got a party going on. it's celebrities and food and, you know, drugs. Not that I did drugs, but I mean, it was like this full party. I felt like, I don't know if you remember Stardust Memories, where there's two trains side by side and Woody Allen is alone with these old people in his train car. And then there's this party going on and
The clowns and everything, yeah.
and Sharon Stone is there, and you know, and so I felt like that I'm alone and I'm trying to get his attention. I'm at my doorway, like, you know, and then he finally sees me, and he's like, oh, and he kind of runs over and goes, "Hey, yeah, Mike, got a great party going on in my dressing room. Is it okay if I take a shit in here?"
Oh,
Like, yeah,
no, Kenny G.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
You didn't get to go to the party, huh?
So there's nothing better than leaving on a shit story.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for doing this. It was lovely getting to know you. And
Yeah.
I am I look forward to maybe someday in the future we'll meet up at a Rosenthal pizza movie night and have a slice and a movie. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this tremendously, and I am loving the book so much. One more time, would you hold it up? It's a funny thing how the professional comedy business made me fat and bald. And it's really wonderful. It's wonderfully written, and I'm not easy with that. And it's a delight. I'm really enjoying it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Okay.
All right, take care.
All right.
Bye-bye, everybody.